Cherie, don't like it. Rock the Kasbah, rock the Kasbah. For somebody who doesn't sing and is completely tone deaf, I sure seem to sing a lot on this program. But the reason I'm singing that song is because today we're going to be talking about my adventure in Morocco from last fall. We'll also be talking to my guide, an amazing, charming Berber woman. I think she was the very first female guide in Morocco. So she'll be joining us on the program, giving us her take of hiking in the Atlas Mountains and what it's like to be a Berber and the Berber villages and all that. So I think we've got a pretty interesting episode, most of which is going to be talking about the culture of Morocco, because my trip was very culturally based. So you'll be learning a lot about that. And at the end, again, I'll be talking to Chama about hiking in the Atlas Mountains. And finally, I'll conclude with some of the things that I did wrong with this trip, some of the regrets that I have about my trip to Morocco, so that you don't make the same kind of mistakes that I did. And so with that, let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and I'm glad you're here today. Last fall, I spent over 3 months touring the Middle East and Morocco. And this is part 2 of my adventure. I did the Jordan trip recently, and today we're going to be going to Morocco, a fascinating country. That was my first stop on my trip. I did not know what to expect. I'd never been to a predominantly Muslim country before, and you read things in the newspaper and here and there, and I was a little bit nervous, a little bit twitchy, and I didn't know what to expect. So I was actually finishing up a travel conference in Billings, Montana. So I took a very, very long flight to get into Casablanca. And I was like, I didn't know what to expect. And to me, even though Morocco's in northern Africa, to me, it's like the Middle East because it's Muslim. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just how I mentally classified in my head. So I had a hijab or a headscarf. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be wearing it or not. So I just had it, and I figured I'll just kind of suss that out once I get there. And I did not feel like it was necessary when I got there. I get there, I'm trying to figure out, where do I go? What do I do? And so I managed to get the ticket, figure out where I was supposed to go, what platform and all that kind of thing. And I coughed up the extra $2 to go first class, which I had the whole car to myself. So I still wasn't sure what I should be doing with the headscarf thing. But I figured I'll just keep winging it and see if I was getting a bad reaction. Then I'd figure it out then. So I had to change trains, and I got that figured out. People are pretty good with pantomime, getting you where you need to go. I found almost everywhere in the world, pantomime works great, even if I can't speak Arabic or whatever country I'm in, whatever language they speak. So I get over, cross under, get onto the right platform for my next train. And this is a bigger train. I guess I'd just taken the local out of the airport to catch the main connector one. And so I go into this one car, and they ushered me out. And I was like, well, I don't know what that's all about. I go into another car, and they shake their head too. And so I had read where women only had to be in a car, and I didn't know what to do. Finally, some man grabs me, and he pulls me to this one car, and he points on my ticket. I had been assigned a seat. I didn't realize that. I should, next memo to self, pay attention to the ticket that you buy and see if there is more information there. Even if you can't read the things, you can usually read the numbers. So anyway, so I find my little cab. I was in this glassed-in booth for all intents and purposes with 2 rows of seats facing each other, and there were 3 men sound asleep. And I was like, I thought I was supposed to be in a girls-only car. But I was like, that's what the ticket said. So I quietly go in so I don't disturb them. I sit down. I was like, well, I'll find out what happened, if I did this wrong when they wake up. Conductor comes by a little bit later, doesn't seem at all bothered that I'm in this car. And so we all show our tickets, and the men now see I'm in there, and they smile, I smile. And then, so that was bad information I'd gotten, that women had to be in a separate train. So I was like, okay, that's cool. I'm still scarfless. I have it with me, around me, but not on my head because I first of all, I look ridiculous. And they can tell just by my blonde hair that I don't belong there. And like I said, everybody just smiled and they went back to sleep. I actually took a nap too because it had been such a long flight. I make it to Marrakesh uneventfully, and I had scheduled a tour. So even though I was there a couple days early, they arranged to have me picked up. So this nice young man comes, gets me, takes me down to where you get to the old historic area in these Medinas. The cars can't go there anymore. So then my Airbnb guy said, he tells us where to meet so that he can come walk me back to the apartment, because I would never find it on my own. It is truly a maze, and now it's dark, so I would have gotten totally lost. So that was a nice solution to that problem. And so I indicate to my host that I said, I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten in forever. Can I get something to eat before we get there? So he says, yeah, he knows where to go. So he takes me to this restaurant. There's no women there. And I was like, I don't know if I'm even supposed to be in here. Like I said, I have no clue what is considered socially acceptable there or not. All I know is I don't see any women. It's all men sitting there. It's always the men are out in the coffee shops and everything. I'd find that later as well. But they don't seem to pay me any mind that I go in, so I order a sandwich to go and make it to my apartment, which I loved. This place, I'm in the heart of the historic downtown Medina area, and it is what you think of Morocco. It's all red, very vibrant pillows and ornate lanterns, and I've got this huge community sofa. The place is just for myself, but it was just charming. So I was like, well, I think I'm going to like this. It was just really, really cool. And, of course, I was tired, so promptly went to sleep and figured I'll deal with Marrakesh and what's going on the next day. And so the next day, Peg, one of our Active Travel Adventure listeners, she and I had connected and talked about this trip. And so she's also going on this tour, same as me. And so she had been there a little bit earlier, so she'd already scoped out things and had signed us up for a cooking class that we were to take the next day. So even though we hadn't met in person, we felt like we kind of knew each other and spotted each other right away when we met at the site where we were supposed to meet our cooking instructor. And that was a lot of fun. We are walking around to the various different food stalls, collecting the fruits and vegetables that we'll need to make our traditional Moroccan dishes later in this woman's apartment. And I thought it was interesting. We stop at this one chicken stand. The chickens are in the little cages up back behind him. And I guess she tells him how many chickens she wants. We go get the vegetables, come back, the chickens are ready for us. So you can't get any fresher than that. You feel a little close to your food source there. I am an omnivore and I'll eat just about anything. But I must say, it was really fresh. It was very tasty. And so we go to the woman's apartment and she teaches us how to make traditional tangine. So tangine is like the traditional Moroccan or North African dish. It's made in this ceramic or clay pot that's very distinctive looking. And so the cookware is also called tangine. And what tangine is a very rich stew. I had it usually with chicken, but they also can use other meats or fish like that in it. And you'll eat that an awful lot if you go to Morocco. So we learned how to make that and learn how to cut up all the herbs and all that. And that was just a nice introduction to the Moroccan culture. So I sure enjoyed that. And the next day we were meeting up with our group. And as much as I loved Morocco, I actually chose the wrong tour for me. This was much more sitting on the bus kind of a tour than I had imagined. And you can learn more about my feelings about this tour in my Adventure Travel Show podcast episode on how to choose a tour company, because this was not the right tour for me. As much as I loved many of the things we saw and did, it was trying to cram too much of a country into a short period of time. I believe the country of Morocco is around the size of California. And there's just no way you can do it justice and really get a feel for a country if you try to cram that size country into a 2-week tour. So we spent an awful lot of time on the bus getting from one place to another just to check the box that we saw something. So as I said, at the end of the program, I'm going to give you my personal advice on if you were to go to Morocco, what I would do to get a good solid feel of it so that you're actually doing the things instead of going to look at the things that you could be doing, which is kind of how I felt. So, but like I said, Morocco is a cool country. I'd love to go back and do more slow travel there. It's one that I feel very safe going to as a solo female. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that I felt that way. And I'll also be going to a little bit about some safety things, but they're basically a lot of the traditional safety maneuvers that you do anytime that you go to a city, whether it's in your home country or a foreign country. So that'll be coming up a little later. So obviously Morocco is a predominantly Muslim country. And so you will see a mosque virtually, it seems like in some places on every corner. And they do a traditional call to prayer 5 times a day. And I found that throughout my Mideastern journey, that was one of my favorite things about it. There's something very sacred about stopping and pausing and listening to this haunting call to prayer. I can't understand a word they're saying, but I really, really did enjoy that. In the mosques themselves, it's very interesting to me that you will see only geometric decoration. There will be no animals, flora, any depictions of humans. They don't want you to inadvertently worship an idol. So all you'll see are geometric patterns, which was kind of cool. Mostly they're built with cedar from the Atlas Mountains, the area that Chama is going to be talking to us about a little bit later. You'll see just unbelievably vast quantities of handmade blue-green mustard tile that's done in the traditional patterns. Their mosaic work is extraordinary. Inside the mosque, you'll also see all these big plaster carvings, basically wishing long life and happiness. And like I said, I couldn't read them, but it was just beautiful to look at. On our first day out, we went to the Bahia Palace, and we learned why there's always a fountain in the center of the buildings, and that is to signify life. Again, we saw the extraordinary carvings in the plaster, just filled with the beautiful Arabic script or calligraphy. And I learned, too, that the tile down below is to help keep that condensation off the walls and to help preserve that plaster walls as much as possible in the wintertime. From the Bahia Palace, then we go over to the Jewish quarters, and I found it interesting that you can tell the difference between a Muslim abode or house and a Jewish abode. If it's Muslim, all the courtyards, all the windows and all that open to the inside courtyard area. If it's a Jewish quarter, they have balconies opening to the outside. And once upon a time, there was a large Jewish population there, but after the birth of Israel, many moved there. Some also went to the U.S. and Australia and scattered throughout the world. But at the Bahia Palace, the Jewish quarter is right next door, and that was done so that the king could better protect his Jewish people. And some of the Jews are actually buried alongside some of the king's staff and all that. And again, you can tell the difference between a Jewish grave, because that would have markings, whereas the Muslim graves are very plain. And when we were out in the countryside, you could tell it was a graveyard just by upright stones pointing up. So they don't really do any of the markers or memorials like I'm familiar with here in the United States. So now let's talk about those crazy, crazy Medinas. These are the traditional historic areas, and they are literally a maze, just a cacophony of noise and smells and sounds and thousands of little merchant stalls, and it's very, very easy to get lost. It's one stall after another of spices, all kinds of food, home decor, Winston cigarettes for some reason. Winston's the big thing there. You'll see donkeys, teeny little donkeys compared to what I'm used to seeing here in the States, and they're always pulling a wagon because the alleyways are so small, cars can't fit in there. So the donkeys do the transport of bringing the materials for the merchants inside. And out in the center, particularly at night, that's when a lot of the action happens. That's when you'll see the snake charmers and the musicians and the people with their monkey doing the tricks and all that kind of thing. And there'll be tables of, it's cooler, obviously, at night too. So that's when the city comes alive. And people just be out just enjoying the fine weather, and you'll see all the various vendors just out trying to make a buck. When I think of the Medinas and I think of the center square, I just think of just this cacophony of sound of the donkeys clomping as they're bringing all their gear around, the little beep, beep, beeping of the motorbikes because they're another mass method of transportation in and around the area, the snake charmers doing that fluty thing, it's called a punji. It's a gourd instrument that they make, and they use a circular breathing technique to make the sound keep going on and on constantly. You'll see women trying to get you to do a henna tattoo, which I caution you not to, because our guide did say that sometimes they use a somewhat toxic ink in there that they use, even though it's a temporary tattoo. I wouldn't do it just because of what she said there, but it's quite intricate, some of the detail work that they do, so that's kind of cool. I wouldn't feel comfortable being in the center square at night by myself as a solo female, but I was lucky enough that we did do a street food tour. That was one of the highlights of my trip. I highly recommend signing up for this night street tour. We got to experience all sorts of food I would never have had the courage to try because I wouldn't know which stalls had the sanitation that's acceptable to stomachs that aren't used to some of the food. And also because we were just doing little taste tests, we were able to try so much different food. I tried something I know I would never order on my own. They ordered the sheep's head. And so I got to taste some cheek and some tongue and even some eyeball. You don't eat the pupil, just the white part. So again, I would never risk eating that as my dinner, but I sure want to try everything if it's offered, particularly if it's just one bite. So that truly was a highlight. Highly recommend it. You can find it on Airbnb Experiences, which I started using those on this trip, and I am sold. They are really a cool opportunity to meet locals. They know the inside scoop of their towns, and they're proud to show them off. I used them extensively in Jordan, and it was a thrill. I found their idea of a fast food sandwich interesting, too. It's basically a sandwich. So they'll take turkey or beef as a sausage, cover it in vegetables, top it with an egg or sometimes cheese, and then put it in a bread pocket. Another thing we tried was prickly pear. So you remove the spines, remove the skin, and then you eat it raw. It's delicious, and it's got some hard seeds. You just swallow those. And I found out that those seeds are actually more precious monetarily wise than argan oil. Later in the trip, we went to a spice place, and they said that the prickly pear as a lotion and some of the ways they used it was really, really expensive, relatively speaking, to some of the other things that we saw. So another thing I noticed is that the locals mainly snack. They don't go out to dinner, although they're starting to do that more. Meals are mainly eaten at home with the family. And everything is fresh, fresh, fresh. Of course, the coffee is very strong, too strong for me. So what we would often drink instead is something called noos noos, which is a lot of milk on top of coffee. And that was a lot more agreeable to my stomach. We also drink a lot of bottled water because you can't drink the water, and it disturbed me how much plastic we were using. Chama assured us that a lot of those bottles are reused. They'll fill it with oil and things like that, but there's still, as you get in the countryside and outside, there's just so much waste. So I do encourage you to bring one of the new bottles that you can buy that have the built-in filter so that you can drink water anywhere in the world, because it's a real problem. Chama says they do take the trash out into the back 90 or something back, probably out in the desert a little bit, and burn it, but plastic doesn't even burn. It just kind of melts. And so that was something that we as travelers can do to help that situation a little bit. They don't have plastic bags at all there, so at least that's been resolved. But there you go through a lot of water bottles. And speaking of things that you drink, liquor is technically illegal for Muslims to drink, although some do drink. I did learn. You can, because of such a tourist-dependent area, buy alcohol. It's not available everywhere, but if you ask some of your hosts, they can tell you where to get it if you want to. I saw it sometimes in restaurants, and sometimes you're allowed to bring some in restaurants, but many don't allow it or serve it at all. So if that's important to you, you just kind of got to get that kind of figured out ahead of time. One thing, too, while you're there, you'll want to pick up some saffron. In the United States, it's extraordinarily expensive, but over there, it grows readily, and so you can pick up something. I brought some back for my sister. I think I paid like $12 for the small container that easily would have cost me over $50 here in the States. If you don't know what saffron is, you know the little spring bulb called a crocus, and the little orange thing that comes up out of the middle, the stigma. That little orange thing is what's harvested and is sold as saffron. So you know how many crocus have to be grown in order to get an ounce of that? That's why it's so expensive. Morocco is the world's third largest producer of saffron, and that's one reason it's so inexpensive there. So do pick up on that while you're there. They use it both for seasoning and for coloring of their foods. So when I started the show today, I was rocking the Kasbah. So what exactly is a Kasbah? So in the old days, the Kasbah is kind of like a citadel or a fortress to protect people from attacks. And in fact, on the road from the Sahara to Marrakesh, one of the great stopping places was this Kasbah. And the tariff to stay there would be like a kilogram of saffron or a kilogram of henna or salt or gold. We stayed in a Kasbah in a little Tel Aviv village. I think it had a population of about 3,000. So while we stayed in a modern Kasbah that's been turned into a guest house, also in the town was an ancient Kasbah that we were able to go visit and see. all the still remaining beautiful mosaics, and a guide has to take you through there because there's several rooms and areas that are still unstable because a lot of them are not being maintained the way that they should be these days. But it's nice to be able to go in and actually see these structures. They're really cool. Back at the castle in its day, the king had 5 wives and 85 concubines. That is a busy man. And so we were taking a little walk in the evening before dinner, and there was these 3 women using a sickle to cut the grass that was growing underneath the trees. And so they would use that for hay and for food for their livestock. And the reason they couldn't let the livestock in there is because then the goats would eat the pomegranate trees and whatever else that they were growing in there. So they had to do all this manual labor to collect the food for their goats or sheep or whatever it was that they had. Somebody commented to the women how hard they were working, and they laughed and they said, the joke is that the women are working all day while the men are sitting in the coffee shops. And there's a little bit of truth to that because you, generally speaking, only see men in the coffee shops. Very rarely will you see a woman at a restaurant or a cafe with their girlfriends. Sometimes she'll be with her family at night, but it wasn't very common. But like I said, most meals are still consumed at home, and the outdoor cafes and all that are mainly for snacks, not for going out to dinner. And then also on that walk, and this is in late September, I believe it was. So the rains had gone and the riverbed was drying up. And so it is like a crackly red clay that when you stomped on it, it made this very satisfying crunch. So it was kind of like a reverse of a kid jumping in a puddle. We were breaking up the riverbed clay, and that was kind of fun. Back at our Kasbah Inn, Chama was going to demonstrate a Moroccan dance for us, but then a man entered the room, so the exhibition was going to have to wait till later because she would not do it in front of the man. One town we visited was called the Valley of Roses, and like its namesake, the entire town is just filled with roses. This is a rose grower's dream because of the lack of humidity. You don't have the fungus problems, I'm guessing, being a former nursery person. And so everything was just beautiful, filled with gorgeous roses. Even the taxi cabs were pink. And every May, they have a big festival called the Queen of Roses Festival, and that brings in about 30,000 visitors. So if you happen to be there at the end of the visiting season in the spring, try to swing by to catch that festival. That should be a lot of fun. One of my favorite places that we visited was the city of Chefchaouen, which is the blue city. The buildings are washed in a blue paint that is just magical looking. And like the other towns, you'll have the main square that you can walk around the Medinas and all that. So that's fun to do. But just the colorfulness of the town itself made it very attractive. And from there, I was also able to take a day hike up into the Rif Mountains. That was quite enjoyable. So I would definitely recommend adding Chefchaouen to your list when you go there. And be sure to catch the sunset. You have to climb up a hill to the Spanish mosque and get there early because it's quite an attraction so that you get a nice seat to watch the sun go down over the blue city. One thing you'll notice about the architecture as you're driving through the country is that the color of the homes changes according to where you are, and that's based on the fact that they're making the stucco from the actual soil there, the bricks and the stone, in the traditional way. So it might be red in one area, orangey yellow in another area. And these mud coatings have to be redone each year. And that was one reason some of the Kasbahs are falling apart, because if nobody's recovering them, then they start decaying because the weather will beat them down. I did notice they are starting to use cinder block a little bit more. And in fact, one modern town that we drove through, there is color because, like I said, almost all the other towns we went through were the color of the local soil. But with cinder block now, you can stain or paint it. So for the first time, I saw color on the buildings. They were red, they were brown, they were olive green. So this one new town, they built the whole town before anybody moves in, and then apparently the rich people moved to the new towns. We went through one modern city that was like their Hollywood, where they do all of their film production, and that was a really modern town. Because everything was so new and modern, it almost didn't look real. One thing I did like about our tour is that we were often taken to interesting places to eat, and whenever possible, with a local family or in a private setting. In one town, we stopped in a guest house where we had a traditional Moroccan meal. So what is that? In this case, it was a fava bean soup filled with cumin and saffron. We had a Berber salad and Berber pizza and the ubiquitous chicken on a skewer. And like almost every after meal, it's a serving of a bunch of fresh fruit as a dessert, and that would be including something like cinnamon, orange slices, dates, pomegranate seeds, grapes, melon, plums, lots and lots of fruits, and lots of vegetables. It's a great growing environment in Morocco, so you have a huge abundance of produce. Another thing we did was visit a couple of the craft cooperatives. We went to a rug women's cooperative where we got to watch them make the handmade wool rugs, and they use the hair of camel, goats, and sheep in order to make them, and the craftsmanship is remarkable. We went to a tannery in Fez to see how they make all the leather goods there, and so you can pick up some really nice leather products. And of course, they're going to have a showroom, as all these places would like to sell you something after you see how they make it. Ditto if you go to a mosaic craft store as well, and that's really interesting to watch. It's got to be so tedious and hard on the eyes to shape and get those patterns in, but they are beautiful. Here's a tip too: if you buy something large that you're going to have shipped back home, such as a mosaic table or fountain, make sure that you sign underneath in a place that you can't see to make sure that the one that you purchased is the one that you actually get, so they don't inadvertently or otherwise send you something of not as good a quality as the one that you looked at, studied, and decided was the one for you. So we've talked a lot about the culture in Morocco, but now let's talk about some of the adventure kinds of things you can do. Like I said, my trip was more cultural, so I'm going to have Chama talk a little bit more about hiking a little bit, but I did get to do one thing that was somewhat adventurous. I went on an overnight camel trek in the Sahara Desert, and you spend the night in a traditional Berber Bedouin tent. And while the tent was traditional, it's made of a big woven covering of the wool of sheep and goats, their main livestock. However, inside we were glamping a little bit. We had a nice, beautiful wool rug to keep the sand out of our beds. We were on comfortable cots. We had nice blankets, pillows, and even a solar light that we could use at night for a brief time. So that was kind of nice. They do have a tented latrine that's nearby. So it's a little bit rustic, but you're very comfortable. So when you do the overnight camel trek, you get to see the sunset and the sunrise over the desert. Beautiful. And at night, since you have zero light pollution, the stars are spectacular. And what's really nice about it too is the Berber Bedouin people are the ones that run these sites. So you get to actually meet some of the local Berber men. You eat all your meals outside over a campfire. And of course, you always have the mint tea after every single meal. And the food is delicious. So I've got a funny story. So I stepped away to use the latrine. And while I was gone, everybody decided they wanted to go out into the desert to watch the stars away from the campfire. And of course, I got to see them when I got out in the middle of the night too. So that I did get to see the stars at night. But in the meantime, so I get out and all my tour people are gone. So it's just the guys running the camp, sitting around the campfire, and some had brought out some instruments and they're singing and having a good old time. So I went over to join them. And they got up then to show me one of their Berber dances. I was like, well, that's fun. Would you like to learn one of the dances we do where I come from? And they said, sure. And I don't know what you're allowed to do there as far as male and female, because everything I've been reading before I go there was much more conservative than what I witnessed in Morocco. So anyway, they said, no problem. So one guy volunteers to be my partner. And so I said, is it okay that I touch you? He said, yeah, that's fine. So I'm showing him how to do, and you UK people, you're going to laugh at the name. It's a beach dance we do in the South called the shag. Not at all what you guys do in England when you are shagging. But anyway, so it's a nice, just a nice casual dance. It's a lot of fun. And so I'm showing that. Then this other woman, not in our group, from Greece comes out to join us. So she's teaching us a Greek dance, and it was just a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed that a lot. And I would say, too, is that I mentioned alcohol, I think, once before. You are allowed to bring wine. So we brought our own wine thing. So we were all enjoying a bottle of wine. It was just a really, really beautiful, pleasant evening out under the stars in the Sahara Desert. So I really highly recommend that. And you want to make sure you go to the website, activetravelaadventures.com/Morocco, to check out all the photos, including me in my Bedouin headgear that I was wearing on the camel trek, because we stopped to get scars before we got on our camels. And so there's some fabulous photos there of just the variety of the things that I saw culture-wise, some hiking photos and all that. So I encourage you to go to activetravelaadventures.com/Morocco to check them out for yourself. I would caution one thing. Again, is one thing I did not like about the tour is we went on the camel trek in the morning, spent the whole afternoon sitting under the shade at an oasis, waiting for the sun to not be so unbearable so that we can finish our camel trek into the Bedouin camp. If you do this, you want to get one where you're going in the late afternoon so you don't waste half a day just waiting for the sun to go down a little bit. I met somebody at our inn that had done this the day before, and they were able to go out in the afternoon, whereas we wasted half of a day of our trip just sitting around under the trees in the heat, not able to really do anything. So look at that when you're choosing which tour that you do, because it is fun to do the camel rides. Camels are adorable. It's a really clunky way to get on. That's the most exciting part of the whole thing, is because they're so big and clunky. It's like a 2-step program. And so that's like the only twitchy thing, is getting up and getting down off the camel. But they're very easy, chill animals. They had these gorgeous long eyelashes to keep the sand out of their eyes. And it was a lot of fun. So I recommend doing that. I recommend, if you have the time, do the overnight at the camps. That adds to the experience. And just look out for what time you're actually going to get on that camel so that you're doing this to maximize the activities that you can do during your time in Morocco. While I loved Morocco and do want to go back, I did not love my tour company on this, so I'm not recommending them. I'm recommending the company that I went to Jordan with in the travel planner that will go with this episode, that will come out at next month's newsletter. Or if you're listening to this many moons in the future, then just write me at kit@activetraveladventures.com and I'll get you on the list and send you out the travel planner for Morocco that does have my recommendations of a company that does a more active trip, that is not trying to cram this huge country into a brief period of time like the one that I went on. And while I'm talking about newsletters, I encourage you to sign up for it. I only send out one email a month. That's at the beginning of each month. And you can sign up directly with a link from the show notes on this. So if you're on your phone, just scroll down on the show notes and you can just click it and sign right up there. I don't spam you. It's mainly just to give you any free downloads and any special tips that I have, and a way for us to communicate back and forth easier. So I do encourage you to sign up for that. And hey, that's how I met my new friend Peg, who she and I went on this trip together. So you know how I mentioned this was a grower's paradise? The case in point is, after we left the desert on our drive to the next location, we stopped at a woman's house and had lunch, and everything in the entire meal she grew in her backyard. And so we were able to walk through the gardens as well, but it's just incredible. It was just an abundance of produce. We had the traditional Moroccan salad. We had rice with goat cheese, tomatoes and cucumbers, potatoes, beets, carrots. And then we had the typical chicken over couscous. And for dessert, of course, we had apple, because we were in the apple capital of Morocco. We had grapes, melons, and banana, and of course, the ubiquitous tea known as Berber whiskey. Since Muslims generally don't drink, our Berber whiskey is just the hot, sweet mint tea that we have after every meal. So you've heard me talk about my experiences in Morocco, but I want to get Chama on to tell us a little bit about things from her perspective. Now, because the technology is not as developed there, we had to do this interview a little bit different. I had to email her the questions, and then she recorded on WhatsApp and then sent those to me, which I then was able to download and then cut and paste to put the following segment together for you. And then after we talk to Chama, then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some safety tips and some advice of what I would recommend for people that are interested in going to Morocco, and we'll finish up. So let's get started with Chama. Chama, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, Kit. Hope you are doing well. Hello to all listeners. Hope you are doing great everywhere you are. Chama with you from Morocco, exactly in the Atlas Mountains, Ait Bougmaz Valley, the Valley of Happiness. Thank you so much for hosting me on your interview. I am a tour guide in Morocco, and I do different tours around Morocco, like cycling tours, hiking tours, and walking tours.
So you were a Berber woman from a Berber village. What exactly does that mean? Tell us about it.
Yes, I am a Berber girl from the Atlas Mountain, exactly in Ait Bougmaz Valley, which is the Happy Valley. The Berbers are a group of people who inhabited the area of North Africa and have migrated from Asia into Africa. The Berbers did not call themselves by the name Berber. but instead were known as the Amazigh, which can be translated to mean free man. The reason that the term Berber became associated with this societal group is because the Greeks coined the phrase, which means no Greek, to distinguish these people from themselves. The term Berber was then later translated into the Latin and Arabic languages, from which the word barbarian, a term that was also used to describe the Berbers. But historically speaking, there is no exact explanation where they come from. However, there are some many great things to say about them, especially about their way of life. Amazigh people usually choose to live in the mountains or places near the mountains. They live in extended families, which makes them have a very unique way of life. They are known to have solidarity and hospitality among them. They help each other in very single detail of their lives. They are also known to have one of the best ways of doing festivals and marriages in Morocco. In marriages, for example, they gather the groups and perform very amazing dances. They make Eid food and invite as many people as they can. The Amazigh women are known to be hardworking and talented. Though inside activities, some of them get their degrees and find a job to be independent.
I know I came to Morocco with a lot of incorrect preconceived notions about what it was like to be a Muslim woman. Can you talk a little bit about that?
As far as I can tell you, the idea that Muslim women cannot work as a tour guide is just a stereotype. This idea is usually transmitted through media. The truth is that Muslim women are just as normal as any other women of different belief. It is just a matter of belief. Being a Muslim, Christian, atheist, or any other believer does not interfere or decide the kind of jobs that a person should do. I do believe that Muslim women are perfectly qualified to work as a tour guide. They represent a different way of perceiving life. They are free to choose the job they want, not like what is conveyed in media. More than that, there are some women who work instead of their husbands. They go out while their husbands stay home. Despite all this, there are some areas that don't give such rights to women. For example, the region in which I live, women haven't right to be a tour guide, but look from society, and their view the work of women is limited to housekeeping and raising children.
Okay, you've answered my cultural questions for you, but now let's switch to the hiking. You're an avid hiker and, in fact, a hiking and cycling guide. Tell us where your favorite mountains are to hike.
In fact, all places are beautiful, but personally, I like to hike in the Happy Valley, which is Aitbougmaz Valley, my hometown, and Mgoun Valley as well. Why? Because you have the opportunity to learn more about different traditions and cultures. Morocco is the beautiful land with wonderful places for trekking holidays, where you particularly find lots of mountains climb like Toubkal Mountain, Mgoun Mountains, Jbel Saghro, Volcanic Massif, Izoghar in Aitbougmaz Valley or Happy Valley, or walking tours via Berber villages in high and middle Atlas Mountains. The Atlas Mountains trekking give you the opportunities and the possibility to contact directly with incredible variety of Berber culture by walking through different green Berber villages and deep valleys, their unique hospitality, architecture, and language.
If you want to go into the desert, the best months are going to be March through May, and then September and October. But if you're going to be hiking in the mountains, what is your time window there?
So the best time to hike in the Atlas Mountains, of course, there are different times in every place. For example, in Aitubugumaz Valley, the good time to hike there from April to November, and for Mgun Valley from March to November, and Tubkal Mountain from May to October.
Now, is this something we need to backpack and carry all of our gear, or are we day hiking, or what's the story there?
While walking, carry the backpacks with us. All we need per day, like water, camera, sun cream, winter jacket, depending the weather, phone, personal aid first kit, because the mules were carrying our big bag of clothing.
So that answers that. We're going to have pack animals carrying our heavy gear. That's sweet. If someone is a do-it-yourselfer type hiker, do you recommend that they still have a guide, even if they're not on an organized tour?
Yes. The guide is necessary to be with the group from the beginning until the end. And it's good to choose a Berber guide. Why? Because will be easy for him or her to communicate with the Berber local exactly.
Well, Chama, I sure appreciate you taking the time to come on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you so much, Kate, for your time and for these interesting interviews. I wish you the best and good luck because you are the best. Thank you so much again. In Arabic, shukran. In Berber, saha or tanmirt means thank you. Goodbye and see you next time. All the best.
I got to tell you, that woman is really impressive. She's 25 years old. I believe she was a software engineer before she decided she actually preferred guiding. She speaks 5 languages. She's got personality plus, and it was a thrill having her as our local guide during the tour. So thanks again, Chama, for coming on the show. So I've got a few more things I want to talk about before we wrap up. One is safety, and the other is some things that I would recommend that you do differently than what I did. So let's talk about safety. I dabbled some of the things I'm going to tell you throughout this program, but I wanted to kind of put them all in one spot for you. First of all, I felt very, very safe in Morocco. The only exception to that was in Fez. It made me a little bit uncomfortable that the hotel felt it was necessary to hire a security guard to escort us to the Hammam bath in the middle of the day. And then also we were discouraged from going into the Medina and into the square at night. We did not get those warnings in Marrakesh. So if I had my druthers doing another trip again, I would say if you're short on time, skip Fez. I think they were trying to tell us something. In Marrakesh, I felt perfectly fine. That being said, being a solo female, I wouldn't go into the Medina and the square at night by myself. I'd make sure I had other people with me because A, there's always safety in numbers, and B, it truly is a maze and it would be very, very easy to get lost. I found that my Apple Maps application worked terrible in the Medina. There's just too many nooks and crannies and alleyways, and so it just didn't have a good grasp of that. And so I would recommend that once you get to your lodging, pin your location in your phone so that way you can always get back to the general direction, even if you get lost and have to go a lot of false turns like a rat in a maze. You can probably eventually get back there. Because remember, you can't take a cab. Like a lot of places I go to, I'll bring a business card with the address. So even if I get terribly lost, I can pick up a cab to get my way back home. The cars can't get into these small streets. So you're going to have to walk. That means you're going to have to be able to find your way back home. So pay attention to any corners that are impressive so that you're going to have to make more of a mental map than normal. And you, like I said, pin your location so you can at least know what direction you should be heading. And after a number of different turns, you can find your way back home. I always did eventually find my way back home. So I don't want to scare you on that. I just want you to be aware of it. You're going to get lost more than normal. Also, always stick really far to the right. You're going to see donkeys going through. You're going to see motor scooters going through. So you don't want to get hit for one thing. And also, you don't want, the women in particular, have your handbag snatched. Keep your handbag under your arm tight, hold on to it, and keep it on the right-hand side so the scooter people can't steal from you. I didn't hear of any incidences, but everything is so tight and crammed together, it would be really easy for that to happen. Also, in the squares itself, you'll see the women trying to encourage you to do a henna tattoo. I was told that the inks are not always perfectly safe and some are somewhat toxic. So as fun as it would be to have a henna tattoo to show off for a few days, it's not smart to do it. So don't do that. Women, always bring a headscarf with you in case you should need it. They sell them all over the place. They're lightweight, they're inexpensive. And in the beginning, I didn't really like them. But towards the end, after being in Muslim countries for over 3.5 months, I find them very attractive now. And they've got some beautiful ones that are not just solid colors anymore that you could bring home. In fact, Chama seemed to have a more beautiful one each day that she came. So she was a very stylish woman. I was very impressed with this young woman. And speaking of women and dress, Muslim countries are conservative countries, and you need to hopefully respect the sensibilities of the local culture. Women should not be showing their elbows. Preferably, they should be in a long sleeve, long pants, or long skirt, no cleavage. And anytime you go into a church or a mosque, there's only 2 mosques in Morocco you can go to if you're not Muslim, cover your head with your scarf. Obviously, no tank tops or shorts. I wasn't on any of the beaches, so there might be an exception there, but err on the side of caution. And I'd be really surprised if it weren't frowned upon to be wearing thongs or really, really teeny bikinis. One thing I really liked that our tour company did do was we were given a roll of dirhams, that's the local currency, because Morocco is a tipping culture. So if you go get a tour of the Kasbah, you provide a little tip, it'd be like 50 cents. So they're not big, but you tip everything. But it's really important. You have to tip in the bathrooms, or sometimes they won't let you use them. And it's only like 1 or 2 dirhams. So it doesn't cost you anything, but you don't get this in change a lot of times when you buy something. So if your tour company does not provide these for you, then go to a bank and get a whole roll yourself. So that way you'll always be able to use one of the toilets, because like I said, you've got to pay the tip in order to use the toilet. Ostensibly to give you toilet paper, but always keep toilet paper with you as well, because sometimes they won't have that available for you. You can't drink the water. I would recommend getting some of these great reusable water bottles now that have the built-in filters. That would help save a lot of the plastic bottles that we're leaving behind as tourists. Chama assures me that a lot of those are being used for storage of oils and such like that, but when we were in the countryside, I did see a lot of plastic waste. So whatever we can do as travelers to help minimize our negative impacts on countries that we visit, I think that's a great thing to do. You've heard me refer several times of how I was not pleased with the tour company that I selected to explore Morocco with. I did do a special episode on my companion podcast, the Adventure Travel Show podcast, after I got back, because I was displeased with my selection there, to figure out what could I have done to make sure I don't make that mistake again. And I put together what I think is a pretty good show with all the research I found on the Adventure Travel Show podcast on how to choose a tour company. I'll put a link in the show notes, and if you have not listened to that, I encourage you to do so. I made a very, very expensive mistake. If you need to take a taxi, use a petite taxi and make sure that you negotiate your price up front. Otherwise, you might be stuck with an outrageous bill at the end. And you negotiate everything. But if you're trying to get down to the very cheapest price, remember that little difference, you might not miss those couple of bucks, but that might make a difference in the quality of the meal that family's going to have that night. So don't try to be so strong in the negotiating, in my opinion. It's nice to get a nice deal, and their first price is not anywhere near what you're going to pay. And it's fun to haggle sometimes, but just don't try to beat them down to the last dollar just to make the sale. There are thousands of stalls. I don't know how they all survive, but so every sale must be very important to them. So just keep that in mind. So some of the things that I did wrong and the things that I would recommend. First of all, like I said, this was the wrong tour for me. And perhaps I've changed over the years. I don't want to be on a sightseeing tour. We spent very little time doing the actual events because we spent so much time in the van. This was not the tour for me at all. And I noticed too, the company I went with has now revised their website to reflect that, because I said, you should have told us. I had no idea. Some days we were in that van 9 hours, 10 hours is ridiculous. I've never been on a tour like that before. Everything we saw and did was great. So it wasn't that. It was the fact that the company was trying to show us in a huge country the size of California in 2 weeks. You just can't do it and actually see and be a part of it. So my recommendation would be to scale back your trip to just a few destinations within the country and actually have the time to enjoy them. So for Morocco, based on what I saw, here's what I would do. We spent a lot of time driving down to the Sahara Desert and getting back out. I would not do that. You can take a camel trek, do the same kind of thing I did. It won't be the Sahara Desert. It's a local desert that I have in the show notes. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. That you are there in a short period of time. You have the same kind of experience. You still get to sleep in the Bedouin tents and all that, but you don't spend 2 days driving in order to do it. So I'd recommend doing that at Marrakesh. Spend lots of time in Marrakesh. Go to the Airbnb experiences. Do that night street food tour. That was terrific. Take a cooking class. Take advantage of all those kinds of things and really dig deep into Marrakesh. And forget Fez. Whether it's for safety reasons, they're very similar. Yes, Fez is the biggest, still intact, traditional Arab city. It looks beautiful, but so does Marrakesh. And the difference that you'll see between the two of those wasn't that different in my eyes. So I would take the time to not do Fez. I would do Marrakesh. I would do Chefchaouen. This is the blue city. It was beautiful. And from there too, I also hired a guide to take me out into the Rif Mountains to do a day hike. So spend a few days in Chefchaouen. It's charming. Do Marrakesh. I would also cancel Casablanca. It's pretty much, any city in the world kind of a thing. The only advantage of Casablanca over Marrakesh is that it has one of the only 2 mosques that non-Muslims can go in, and it's the largest one, the Hussein II Mosque. So it's got the tallest minaret in the world. It's massive. You have to buy tickets to get in. Usually I think they let us in around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so that's, if you do Casablanca, that is one thing worth going to. Rick's Cafe is actually from the Casablanca movie, is a replication of the one in the movie. So it's not even the original one. I didn't even bother going. And in Casablanca, we were just there basically just to catch our plane back home. And you will find probably, like I did, that flying into Casablanca is a lot cheaper than flying into Marrakesh. So what I did to save about $500 is I flew into Casablanca and then I took the train, solo female, no problems whatsoever, as I described earlier, into Marrakesh for a very nominal price. So that was well worth it. Plus I got the extra experience of seeing what it's like to be on a local train. So I would recommend doing that. So to me, Marrakesh, do your desert trip there, go to Chefchaouen, and then arrange to do some hiking or cycling in the Atlas Mountains. I want to remind you, too, that Chama is starting a company, women-driven, all-women hiking and cycling and all that kind of thing. So if you're interested in that, just reach out to me at kit@activetraveladventures.com, and I'll connect the two of you. She doesn't have her website up yet at the time of this recording, but expects to have that sometime this year. So I would encourage you. She's a fabulous woman, and I'd love to see her make a big go of this business. She's going to do great. She's going to probably be president of Morocco one day. I mean, she's a charger. So, and then also, again, like I said, in the travel planner, I have the company I do recommend, and I'm not going to name the one that I'm not recommending because that's not fair. It wasn't a bad tour. It just was the wrong tour for me. The only other advice I have there, too, is when you're on the camel, I was wearing my hiking pants. Get some really billowy cotton pants, like the drawstring, like genie pants or something like that. I was a little hot in my pants. Other than that, just wear loose cotton, long cotton, keep the sun off, and you'll be fine. And don't forget your sunscreen and a wide brim hat. I hope you've enjoyed this visit to Morocco. I sure enjoyed reliving it and also talking to Chama. If you're worried about going to a Muslim country, Morocco and Jordan, the recent episode I did, those two are rocking it. Love both countries, love the people, felt very comfortable, felt very safe and welcomed. They're very hospitable people and they love having visitors. So forget what you're reading in the papers, listen to what we saw on the ground, and go. I really appreciate you listening. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.